Hi everyone, Sarah here. Today I am going to share with you all of my final gear that I used on the Continental Divide Trail. If you've been following me from the beginning, I originally started this journey with the intention of doing the Great Western Loop, which connects the CDT, the Continental Divide Trail, with the Pacific Crest Trail, the PCT. However, I changed plans and did not do that full loop. And though I did do sections of the Grand Enchantment Trail and the PCT, I am going to separate those into a second video because I did change my gear for the PCT section that I did. The Continental Divide Trail was the bulk of my hiking this year, and so I'm just going to focus this very first gear video on that. Overall, I spent way more on gear, changed out gear more often than I originally thought I would. And there's a variety of factors for this. Mainly, I went in with older used gear that I have used on previous thru hikes. I was very comfortable using. I thought it would be warm enough, which was not the case. I was on the early side of starting the CDT, and I did get those early spring snowstorms, and the gear that I had, the rain gear that I had, wetted out very, very quickly, and I was just cold all the time. You're usually above 8,000 feet for most of the trail, and once you get to Colorado, you're usually above 10,000 feet. So it's just very cold. Even if it's warm during the day, it just drops in temperature overnight, which I thought I was warm enough. I thought I had warm enough gear, and it wasn't. The big three, so my shelter, my sleep system, and my backpack. I kept my backpack, the Hyperlight Unbound. I kept that through the entire journey. I did complain about it a lot though. I feel like I complained about it a lot, and I knew that would be a possibility going in, but I wanted a bigger backpack, like more space, more volume than I had previously with the Gossamer Gear Kumo, which is what I used on the Appalachian Trail. Mainly just long water carries, long food carries, more gear. However, I am 5'3". I'm a fairly small individual, and the straps, they're still too wide set, and they felt like they were sliding off of me all the time. And then I was tightening the chest strap, which just constricted my breathing. It was just a whole thing. For my sleep system, I did change two things. I did add a sleeping bag liner. So I added the Sea to Summit Reactor bag liner. It's, I believe, the warmest one that they offer. And I use that, I think, every single night after I got it. So I picked that up in Grants, New Mexico, and used it the entirety of the trail. When I flipped up to Montana, I had ordered some gear via Garage Grown Gear, and they had sent me a free Enlightened Equipment pillow. So I haven't used a pillow since the PCT, really. I just stuff my extra clothes into my sleeping bag stuff sack and use that, which didn't really work on the CDT because everything was either wet or I was wearing it to bed. So yeah, a lot of uncomfortable nights. So it was kind of nice having that pillow. It was free. It was bigger than my original Sea to Summit pillow, but again, it arrived with my gear. It was free. I liked it, so I kept it throughout the rest of the journey. Something that I wish I had changed but didn't, my air mattress. So I do own a Nemo Tensor Extreme, like the super heavy, super warm, but I wish I had sent that to myself in northern New Mexico to have through Colorado, because yeah, again, the rainstorms, the snowstorms, I was just so cold that it would have been a really nice addition. If you are going to start an early season CDT through hike, I would definitely consider warmer sleeping gear. I did keep my shelter, so I used the Z-Packs Pivot Solo the entire way. I really enjoyed the space inside. However, during really heavy rainstorms, snowstorms, and really strong wind, it did not withstand it. And I was just frustrated. I also ended up puncturing it in somehow. I'm not sure what I could have bumped into or what happened there, but there were definitely like holes along the wall. And then there was one point that was totally my fault. I was drying my tent out at a hotel outside, and it blew off of the table that I had it on, and I think it hit one of the vents because it melted a section along the ridge line. A big question that everyone always asks: how many pairs of shoes did you go through? I went through 5 pairs of shoes on the CDT, and my journey ended up being just over 2,500 miles with all of the alternates that I took. So just over 500 miles per pair. However, not all pairs got 500 miles. Some were a lot less, some were a lot more. It just depended on where I was at and if I could swap my shoes. So I bought a pair of Lone Peak 9s in Silver City when I connected to the CDT from the Grand Enchantment Trail. And I hiked in those south to tag the southern terminus. And then when I turned around and hiked back, these shoes were absolutely atrocious. They destroyed my feet. You could feel everything under the soles, and then they rubbed wrong. I had blisters on top of my toes. It caused like weird cramps and swelling. Yeah, they were just terrible. So it went south, tagged the southern terminus, started to backtrack. When I got into Lordsburg, I swapped them out. So I had a pair of Bedrock sandals that I wore from there to Doc Campbell's, where my new shoes were waiting. And those were the King Mountains that I had stored away for a few years, in anticipation for more through hikes. The King Mountains did not hold up as well as I was hoping. They have a really thin upper, and the material just shredded once I started going through snow and post-holing all day, hitting logs and sticks and rocks on the way, crossing creeks, my shoes just being wet all day, freezing overnight, and then continuing that. They never really dried. It was just a lot on these shoes, and the tread shredded off of the first pair and again, like shredded the sides. After that, I shipped myself a pair of Lone Peak 7s. So again, something that I had in my closet at home, ready to go for a through hike. These were great. They did well in the snow. They held up for a while. I took those up to Montana when I flipped up. Still did great. I sent a second pair of King Mountains to Lima, and those, again, very, very, very quickly got shredded. I tripped over a sagebrush and it completely ripped open the front. I tripped over some other things and just tore out the sides. They were destroyed within a couple hundred miles of use, which was so sad. And I ended up buying a pair of Ultra Olympus when I got into Lander. And that's what I finished my CDT hike in, were the Olympus. And they held up really well. They were a bit weird to get used to, just because the Lone Peaks and the King Mountains are a very thin sole. The Olympus are huge, floating on a cloud. Basically, it's a couple inches of sole underneath of your foot. Yeah, but they worked. They were comfortable. If I were to do the CDT again, I'd probably stick with the Olympus. They just held up really well. Hiking with Frisbee, his held up really well in the snow. So it's probably what I would go for in the future. The soles would probably get destroyed fairly quickly in the rocks in southern New Mexico, but overall, I was happy with them. My socks, oh my gosh, y'all. If you've been with me for a while, you know that I wear toe socks, so I wear it in Janjis. They just failed very quickly. Within the first week of a new pair of socks, they would have holes in the toes, in the ball of the foot area. They just fell apart so easily on this trail. And I don't know if it's a quality issue or if it was just the wet, the sand, the rocks, everything that was just destroying them. But I did end up buying a couple pairs of darn toughs, mainly because I got to the point where I needed a pair of socks and the gear store only had darn toughs. So I did wear a pair of normal socks. They were fine. Yeah, they were just thicker and had to get used to them. But yeah, they were okay. I still like my toe socks, but I would still hike in darn toughs too. A pair of socks that I highly recommend for the CDT, an early season, maybe AT or PCT, are a pair of sealskins. Oh my gosh, what a game changer. Waterproof socks. Your feet will still be wet, but they will be warm. Oh my gosh, folks. I wish I had thought of these before I started trail. I had seen some comments about why aren't you getting these? And mainly by the time that I needed them, I really wasn't sure which direction I was going, what town I would end up in. The local gear stores did not carry them. I checked the outdoor gear stores. I called the fishing stores. No one had these socks. And looking at Amazon, trying to get very quick delivery, they usually gave me like a 10-day window in which these socks would be delivered, which when you're through hiking, that's just unacceptable. So you don't know where you're going to be, especially a trail like the CDT, where there are alternates, and depending on weather and timeline, you might change your plans. So yeah, I did not order ahead because I wasn't quite sure where I would be. However, Stitch met me in Salida as she was skipping ahead to Wyoming and had a pair that was too small for her. Luckily, they fit me, and so I bought them from her. Oh, again, get these socks, especially if you're doing an early season through hike and you're going to go through very cold water crossings or will be in snow all day. Yeah, absolute game changer. My rain jacket. Oh my gosh, this was the whole saga. I started the trail with the Outdoor Research Helium. This is a jacket that I acquired on the Appalachian Trail and I've used for a few trails. And I thought going into the CDT that it would be fine. In the first couple of rainstorms, yeah, it was fine. But by the time I hit Colorado and those really heavy spring storms are just quick, it wetted out within a couple minutes, just completely drenched underneath of my rain jacket, and not because of sweat, because of the downpour. That was really disappointing, and I knew I needed a new jacket. I had been chatting with a friend about getting a jacket from her, and there was some back and forth, and then I found a rain jacket on the trail. Definitely not a thru hiker jacket, but I was willing to try anything. It was fleece lined, so it was definitely heavier than the helium. But I was willing to try anything at that point. So I took that and tried that out for a while. And yeah, definitely it was better than the helium. It held up better, but still wasn't fantastic. And again, it was big, it was heavy, it's bulky. So I did end up buying a Patagonia Torrent jacket. And overall, I was fairly happy with that jacket. I stayed dry when it was downpouring. Should have bought a heavier actual rain jacket for the CDT. If you're a thru hiker, usually you go for that lighter gear, which is why I thought the helium would be fine. That's what I've hiked with, or something similar. And yeah, it wasn't enough for the CDT. So highly recommend getting an actual rain jacket if you're doing this trail, especially early season. Get my fleece. Oh my gosh. So I've had the Rob, however, whatever. I've had that fleece again since the AT. I've used it plenty of times. It's usually been warm enough, and it just wasn't. And that's fine. I got to Chama, New Mexico, and Tumble On Outfitters is there. So I bought 2 fleeces from them. I bought the teal fleece that I wore through most of my videos. I pretty much wore that the entire trail for a lot of the day. And I also bought a fleece dress with the alpha sleeves. And I carried that throughout Colorado. I debated on, when to send it home, when to not. But in Colorado, I was really happy to have it because all of my gear was wet and just drenched. And it was really nice to have that fleece dress to sleep in, just bundle up in my sleeping bag. It was nice and warm and dry, and it was fantastic. But I did eventually send it home. It just wasn't something that I needed all the time. I also bought new thermals leggings. I started with an old pair of Patagonia thermals, and again, I was just freezing. These were really old. I've had them, oh my gosh, probably a decade, honestly. But again, I've backpacked with them even recently within the past year, and they've been fine, but it was not enough. I was just looking at what could be delivered within a couple days to the next town that I was going to, which was Grants, New Mexico. And I got these merino, very thick, heavy thermals off of Amazon. Again, they were bulky, they're heavy, but they were so warm, and I wore them almost every single night. My shirt, I started my entire journey in the Outdoor Research Echo Sun shirt, and I have owned this shirt for a while. Again, have hiked in it, used it just day to day. So yeah, it had some wear on it already. So about 2,500 miles into my overall journey, the shoulders gave out. And this is just from sliding my backpack on and off, carrying my backpack. Yeah, just gave out. And when I got to Helena, Montana, there was a gear store there, and I just looked at what they had for sun shirts, and I settled on the Mountain Hardwear sun hoodie, which is the pink one that I finished the CDT with. I probably would not purchase it again for a thru hike. It was out of necessity, and it was available, so I went with it. The hood, at first, I really liked how big the hood was, but there wasn't a drawstring on it, and if there was a light breeze or you walked too briskly, it would just fall off, which was super annoying and completely useless. There was also a drawstring around the bottom, which honestly I think is more like fashion than functional, and especially if you are someone that squats, you have to be careful of where that drawstring is hanging down. Shorts, I wore my Janji shorts the entire way. They did start to rip out towards the very end, but I just went with it because there's only a few hundred more miles to go. But yeah, I was very impressed. Again, a piece of gear that I've owned for a long time. I've gone hiking in them. I've ran in them, gone to the gym in them. So they definitely had some use prior to this journey. So yeah, very impressed with them holding up. The elastic waistband also held up. It never got overstretched. Yeah, it's fantastic. Highly recommend. I know that they're expensive, brand new, but usually they go on sale or, go onto Poshmark or eBay or whatever, and they're usually pretty cheap there. Electronics. My electronics pretty much stayed the same the entire way. I did have 3 battery banks, so I think I was at 25,000. amperage, whatever it's measured in. Who knows? Uh, so I had 2 of the Nightcore 10,000s, and then I had an Anchor magnetic 5,000 battery. And that was mainly for my phone and my AirPods. So I could just have it charging. There weren't extra cords hanging out of my bag. Yeah, it worked fine. I didn't listen to as much music, podcasts, audiobooks as I have on previous thru hikes. There were many, many days where I just hiked in silence. So I probably didn't need the 3rd battery bank. I could have gotten away with either not taking the magnetic battery or even the 10,000 one, or one of the 10,000 ones. I could have just left it home. But I brought it thinking that I'd be listening to a lot of things and editing at night, which just wasn't the case on this journey. I ended up slowing down and taking more time in towns than I originally intended. My kitchen. Something that I did not think would change. My kitchen. I started to eat a lot of food. Mainly, I dropped more weight getting from Arizona to the CDT than I thought I should have at that point. I was much thinner hitting the CDT than I wanted to be in order to complete the CDT. On top of that, again, I was freezing at night. And so I was really trying to bulk up my dinners so I could be warm enough to actually sleep, which meant that my little pot was not big enough, because sometimes I was cooking like 2 full ramens or like a Nor pasta side, or something else, maybe a little healthier. So I did buy the 750 pot. Originally I had the 500 milliliter. So just having that little bit of extra space was so nice. And I think I might continue carrying that pot with me for extra journeys. Just, there's no risk of it overflowing. If I got something like one of the prepackaged meals, like a Tasty Bite or something like that, it's just, there was enough space inside the pot to cook. So I think I'll carry that going forward. At the beginning of this journey, I was gifted a flip fuel, which allows you to refill a fuel canister. So if you have 2 partial cans, you can transfer gas into 1 can and have a full one. But I was ahead of the majority of hikers on the CDT, whether it was northbound or even when I flipped and started heading southbound, and there was usually nothing in the hiker boxes. So this became very useless to me. I only used it a couple times. Also, by the time I started running into people and hiking with others, a lot of people were carrying these. So I could have gone without and just borrowed it when I hit a hostel or a town that other hikers were staying in. I probably wouldn't carry it on the CDT again if I did something similar, but I might still carry it on like the AT or the PCT, where there are just a ton more hikers. The hiker boxes are generally more full. It might be more beneficial there. Another piece of old gear, my stove. I don't know what happened here, but the threads on the stove that, you know, you screw onto the fuel canister, those were stripped. So I could not attach the fuel canister to the stove and therefore use it to cook. This was within the last 2 or 3 weeks on trail. So originally I was going to cold soak. I was like, I'll just switch, but I was hiking with Frisbee. And so we just shared his stove throughout the rest of the journey. Yeah, but I do need a new stove now. Dislike. Water filters, I use the Platypus Quick Draw. It's like the best of the Sawyer Squeeze and the Be Free. They had a baby and the platypus was born. I really liked this water filter. It was so easy to backflush in the backcountry. You just flip your smart water bottle over and back flush through it, and you're good to go, which is great. Unlike, needing the sports cap to back flush the Sawyer or the Beef Free, just the swishing method would not have worked on the CDT. There's a lot of dirty water sources, and it just would have been miserable, I think. I did end up using 3 different ones. The one, it froze. So I just didn't realize that it was going to get that cold overnight. And, when they freeze, I don't want to risk it. It's just easier to buy a new one. And then the other one I did have for the majority of the journey, but it did eventually get so slow and no amount of back flushing would save it. So I did replace it at the end. The final piece of my kitchen, I guess, when I flipped up to Montana, I was gifted the new Atotech bear bag. So I use this for grizzly country, and I'll link to that below as well. But it's just a food storage bag that, grizzlies can't tear into. So I did carry that until like the middle of Wyoming. I think maybe Lander, I sent it home. I didn't have a problem with bears at all, but I know others did have bear encounters. So is everything about my gear on the Continental Divide Trail for 2025. If you have any questions, please leave them below and I will try to do a follow-up video and answer some of those, or just reply in the comments. I will link to my lighter pack with the full gear list and all of the links to any of the items that I talked about. If they're an Amazon link, they are an affiliate link and I get a small percentage of that. I think all of you know how that works at this point. I will also do a follow-up video for part 2 of my gear list, going over the gear that I used on the Grand Enchantment Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. I will be doing other follow-up videos, so like the money mileage breakdown, similar to what I did for the AT. So do watch out for that. I am a little bit behind. There's just been a lot of life stuff since getting home. So I am very behind on recording these videos for you all, but stay tuned and that will be posted. And thank you all again for subscribing, for following along, for cheering me on. And a special thank you to all of those that have contributed via Patreon or buy me a coffee or buying me a gift via my Throne wish list. Like, all of those things help me so much on a thru hike. Even if it's just the cheering on and making sure that I have a little cup of coffee along the way when I get into town, just a nice boost, right? So thank you all, and until next time.